Hey everybody, Orpheolus here with another one of these tier list videos that I've been meaning to do for quite a while, but I kind of spaced it off. Today we are going over the areas throughout the entirety of the Xenoblade Chronicles series. As some of you know, I am a huge fan of Xenoblade Chronicles, and one of the big aspects I really like Xenoblade is the areas of the game, so here I'll be ranking the areas generally on how much do I like them. There are several factors that go in within the area itself. How well is it designed? How good is the music? How good is the environment? Is it bland? Is it colorful? And one other aspect I do incorporate in is how fun it is to speedrun the level, since some of you all know that I am a speedrunner of the Xenoblade series, so I tend to go through these areas fast, and some areas tend to leave a better impression on me than others. So, with this all started, I've organized the areas generally by how, generally when you encounter them in the games, and then also organizing by Xenoblade 1, Xenoblade X, and then Xenoblade 2. As a fair warning, there will be spoilers on this, and some of the areas are a little bit spoilerly. Sorry about that, but with that all started, let's get started. First things first is going to be Colony 9. Colony 9, oh yeah, I didn't quite mention, rankings are pretty obvious. Colony 9 is a really good starting area. I really like the music of the first areas. I think it was a really well composed area. In terms of its organization, I think it's a really well organized area, just having Colony 9 being the essential hub point of the area, and then there's several branching paths you can go to, such as the Outlook Park, to Lenora Shore, in that far off area if you want to go for a good swim. And plus it does incorporate some of the stronger enemies if you go searching for them in a really nice fashion, because a lot of the other areas, they tend to throw high level enemies at you pretty much at the start and just kind of weave them in here and there. Colony 9 does it pretty well by hiding the higher level enemies in a little bit more remote areas, just letting you get a feel of the entire game and how it's going to progress. And plus, Colony 9 as a town is actually really good. I like Colony 9. The only big issue I really have with Colony 9 is that getting to North Shore is really tedious, since there's no landmarks out there and they really could have used one. Next up is Tephra Cave. Tephra Cave is a pretty bleh area, all things considered. The major saving grace about Tephra Cave, though, is the major skips that are within it, because one of the more famous skips of Tephra Cave is getting to an endgame area, which I've actually showcased on the channel before, at least before it was patched out. Thank you, Monolith. Anyways, yeah, otherwise, outside of that pretty famous glitch that lets you get to level 50 pretty much at the start of the game, it's just a pretty bleh level. It does incorporate some aspects of the lore into the game, since one of the areas here is a high Antia ship from way back when crashed into the lower parts, and then just using that area as just kind of like a research point. Tephra Cave is a pretty linear area and just not really my favorite. I mean, even the endgame area I really don't care for all that much. I mean, it's really cool to access a new area towards the end of the game, but even then I think it was just kind of blah. Next up is Bionis Leg. Bionis Leg, I'm kind of between B and A. It's a really well thought out area. It's a pretty vast plain with a lot of cool details that you can explore, and plus you're pretty rewarded with some unique monsters and such if you're willing to track out to some of the more remote areas. And it's actually really cool with some of the areas I do like, such as the shrine where you get one of the giant smears and then other things. However, though, the reason why it's up there because I like the level design, I like the aesthetic of it. Not only that, but the refugee camp is also here, and just a pretty cool area, all things considered. It's pretty fun to walk around on. The only thing that really prevents it from being S, and why I'm kind of hesitant on putting it in more into B, is that it's a lot of empty space. One of the big problems about Xenoblade 1 that is kind of more remedied in X, and especially 2, is that it's a lot of emptiness with nothing really filling it up. Yeah, you have some unique monsters, enemies, and landmarks, but nothing really to encourage you to explore. Unlike Xenoblade 2, where you have like treasure chests, collection points, all that stuff, you're willing to explore all these areas. 1 is just kind of gigantic maps strewn about, so kind of but yeah. Next up is Colony 6. Colony 6, it's pretty low because you have to kind of develop the area itself, and then outside the colony, the area is just kind of bland. There's nothing really to it. There's the lower pathways, the splintered pathways where you go on into Tephra Cave. Sorry, not Tephra Cave, the Ether Mines, and then there's also the escape pod area, but outside of the colony, it's just kind of there. And plus, the colony is pretty cool. I mean, I do like developing Colony 6, and I think it's a really fun quest, but you kind of have to work at it, and otherwise it's just kind of there. Next up is Central Pit. Big Fat D. That sounded better in my head. Anyways, Central Pit, terrible level. It's my least favorite part of doing the speedruns because it's essentially every speedrunner's worst nightmares. Run ending trick. Yes, Tefri, Ethermine skip, which is made harder in Definitive Edition. Auto-scrollers. There's a lot of auto-scrollers, especially when you get down to the blades. Even then, you also have the auto-scroller up top if you don't do the cheating method of having to weave with the fans and such. It's just... And plus, if you fall off, it's like a minute falling in. It is not a fun level whatsoever. And it's one of those areas I really wish Zombie Hover existed so we can skip this pretty bad area. And plus, the music is bad. Next up is Sauerkraut Marsh. Sauerkraut Marsh, it is beautiful, yes. I do like the nighttime music. Everything else, eh. Daytime music is kind of there. And navigating Sauerkraut Marsh on a casual aspect is a nightmare during the daytime because the quad wings, they're everywhere and they'll harass you to no end. And plus, it's one of those kind of faults about the game is that there is nothing really too incentive to explore. I mean, if you know where all the unique monsters and landmarks and locations are, there is a lot of dead space there that really doesn't have anything to fill it up. It's just a lot of wading through. And plus, during the speedrun, it is a lot of waiting because you got the water. They'll really slow you down. Next up is Magna Forest. I really like Magna Forest. I don't think it's an A tier. I think it's a pretty solid B tier. It's a really cool, actually, yeah, it is an A tier. This one, it's another one of those A-B areas. Magna Forest is a really cool area because it's a pretty fast jungle area. And plus, one of the reasons why I really like this level is the river down in the middle because it kind of splits Magna Forest into two while one part is pretty small. There is quite a lot to the area, and plus there's quite a few hidden locations to this area too to help you encourage exploration. And I think it does the exploration aspect a little bit better. I mean, during the southern part when you're trying to go to Leon Telethia, that part of the area is kind of blessed, especially trying to sneak past the dinosaurs, but other than that, it's actually a really cool area, and I do like Magna, and plus the music's pretty good. Next up is Frontier Village. I like Frontier Village for its music. I think it's a pretty interesting area, just having a colony strewn out throughout the entirety of the Great Tree. I think it's a really cool area, just going up. There's some aspects I really don't like about the tree. Mostly, if you fall off, it's a pretty long ways down, and it's quite easy to fall off, at least in my experience, because some of the gates do have quite a few holes in them. So that's kind of there, but I kind of like the area. Area C is an area that I'm gonna put down into D and to C. I don't really like Area C all that much. I mean, yes, it is a pretty cool area. I think musically it's pretty harmonious, but navigating this area, it's a gigantic map of nothing. Essentially, it's probably the largest map of the game, but there's nothing to it because all your navigation is within the hovering reefs, and then you have to fall down and swim for like 10 minutes trying to get to certain locations. It's a nightmare to complete trying to get everything there, and I think it's just a pretty bad map, just having to swim everywhere. If you had a boat, then it would be a little bit more interesting, but just casually, it is not a fun area. I mean, even the speedrun, it's a pretty dull location, just trying to explore things and just trying to go along the pretty linear paths because, yeah, you do have hovering reefs, which is pretty cool, but outside of that, just a bland map. Next up is Alkamoth, another C tier location. I don't like Alkamoth all that much. The main reason why is pretty similar to Area C in that there's a lot of nothing to it. When you look on the map, you have a gigantic area in, on the second level where you go along the balcony and such. Outside of one generic quest, go in there for the city trade quest and Viridian, there is nothing out there, and it's a pretty significant chunk of the map. And plus, the base level itself has a lot of dead area that really doesn't have much use to it. It's just a hyperinflated map for not really much of a good reason, and it's just kind of eh. And since we're kind of going on to Future Connected, the map is also reused there, and that map is the reason why there was a recent rule change for the 100% category where you don't need collectibles, because according to the Frontier Nav, which showcases the location of every item, all the item orbs are actually out of balance, so there you only have 8 chances to get a 2%, I do believe, like 2 or 5 or something stupid like that, drop. it is a stupid map. Next up is the High Antiotome. The High Antiotome is a location I really don't like all that much. I mean, it's not Central Pit bad, but I'd say it's like a CD tier. I don't really like the High Antiotome all that much. On the gameplay balance front, if you have been keeping up a little bit on side quests, the area is an absolute joke because all the enemies there are like in the mid 30s when you're supposed to be up into the upper 30s. That area is just, you tend to skip pretty much all the monsters there. And even then, its layout is kind of bland. The melee section is really straightforward since it's supposed to be like a pretty easy trial, all things considered. But the other section, I really don't care for. It just two paths you walk down trying to get down to the central part. You climb for 3 minutes along the outside because, God forbid, bridges exist. And then it's another climb after the mini-boss, and then you go up the central tower, which is pretty alright. I mean, the High Antiotome does have a skip you can do in the 1.1, in the original version of Definitive Edition, where you do the vine clip thing, and you are able to get some endgame equipment pretty early, which is pretty nice, but otherwise, no. And now for another controversial opinion. Valak Mountain is another CD tier. I don't think it's High Antiotome bad, but it's a map that has a lot of nothing to it. I think it's actually the worst of the maps. The main saving grace between it being a C tier instead of the D tier is that it does have pretty good music. I like the daytime music a little bit. The nighttime music is also really good. And plus, I do kind of like the mountainous aspect of the Valak Mountain, but there is nothing there. In the speedrun, it's literally 10 minutes of walking. I guess also another saving grace about Valak Mountain is that the ice tubes are really jank, especially in the original Definitive Edition with how jumps haven't changed. Not really so good in the Essential Ice Tube is actually kind of stupid because you have jank geometry that you can fly off to your death, and they would rather fix the Tefra skip that only 1% encounter do, compared to Valak Mountain where you have to go through the ice tube, and chances are you're probably going to die or get thrusted into the Anthill Den. Other than that, it's just a gigantic empty map with nothing really to it. I'd say the main good part about it is just going to the secret locations, but other than that, it's just a map of nothing. Next up is Sword Valley. Sword Valley is a upper B, lower A tier. I would say I'm going to put it in B. I think it's a little bit better than Frontier Village. Sword Valley is a really cool area. Just there's once again an area with a lot of nothing to it. I really like the aspect of the first part of Sword Valley is that you have two different ways you can progress through the gates. The first one is kind of brute forcing it through, taking out the gates one by one and then going through, or you can take the upper pathways trying to avoid the fortress units, which is also a pretty cool way to avoid it all. I think it's a really cool area for the first part. Once you get past Metal Phase, that entire back area, there's 3 unique monsters. 2 of them are pretty much along the pathways that lead to Galahad Fortress, and the last one is just in a random location. There's a lot of cool interstices to it, but it's just not really too much of an incentive to explore because it's a lot of empty space there. Which once again is one major problem about Xenoblade 1. Next up is Galahad Fortress. I like Galahad Fortress, but it's way too short of a level. It's a very short level, even in the 100% speedrun, it's like 10-15 minutes long, and that's including fighting all the unique monsters. It's a very short level, and I do like the music. It's when mechanical rhythm is first introduced. It has a cool aesthetic to it. It doesn't incorporate the first unique monster skip of the speedrun, but other than that, it's just way too short, and it would be higher if it had a lot more content to it, but it's just a very short level. Next up is the Fallen Arm. I really like the Fallen Arm. It serves as a pretty cool location, just being the refugee camp of the Machina who don't really want to deal with Egil and his way of wanting to destroy the Bionis. They just want to live in peace, and the Fallen Arm is actually a really cool location because there's a lot of areas you can explore. I mean, the fingertips, except for Digit 1 and 2, don't really have too much purpose to go there outside of a side quest, but all around, I think it's a pretty cool location. I do like the hidden village, so it is a pretty small location, and there's only one landmark, and that's being the kind of the central point of the area. But otherwise, I think it's a pretty cool location. And now we're getting to the first S tier, and that is Mechonis Field. Mechonis Field is probably my favorite area in the game. mostly on the speedrunning perspective and the music. Mechonis Field's music is really good. I like the aesthetic of it and the contrast between Vinous Lake and Mechonis Field, because Vinous Lake is more of a horizontal level with a more I guess organic sounding organic sounding instrumentation like strings and such, while Mechonis Field is a lot more mechanical, vertical, and uses a lot more like synths and a lot of those types of instruments, which is a really cool contrast between it. Mechonis Field is fun because it actually incorporates 4 different skips throughout the entire thing. The boss fight is actually really cool with Jade Face 1, especially if you know the cheeky speedrunning tech with it, using the engineer belt allowing you to skip getting visions with the boss fight. And all around, it's a really cool location navigating through. And I really like climbing the area. Definitely a highlight of the speedrun because you go through Aracy, Valak Mountain, and Sword Valley, which are kind of resident sleeper. Mechonis Field is definitely when the run really begins to pick up. Next up is Central Factory. It's another area that I really like. I don't think it's quite as good as Mechonis Field, but I do like it because it has a lot of quirks to it that makes it a really cool area to explore. There's a lot of pathways a lot of dead ends that do have a little bit of purpose for you going down them, leading to unique monsters, which will kind of help fill up some of the side gaps there. There's a lot of side paths to this area too. If you're just going throughout the speedrunning area, it's a relatively short area, but if you're going for all the locations and such, and unique monsters, there's a lot to this area too that makes it kind of intricate. Kind of the downside is that it's just not quite as good as Mechonis Field. The speedrunning part of it is not really super interesting compared to Mechonis Field, but it's still a really cool area, and I do like the music. And now for a major controversial one. Ignithra is going flat down into sea because of the side quests. The side quests of Ignithra are terrible, especially in the original, because God forbid fairy tale geodes exist. Just trying to complete this area, just a lot of back and forth throughout the central area, just trying to get stupidly rare gods, which you need multiple of. And it just kind of drove me insane just going through this area. And plus, I have 100% spent on this game before. On Definitive Edition, it's not quite as bad because you do have markers on which enemy drops the items, and also where the item orbs are, which does alleviate some of the pain of Ignithra, but it is still a terrible location just for completing. In terms of the speedrun, it's a relatively straightforward area. As long as you have Earthquake and you're stealthy enough, you'll be able to avoid the enemies, but it's still a pretty tedious area to complete. Next up is the Bionis Interior. Right down into D tier. I mean, yes, black liver beans are a terrible meme. They don't exist. But it's just such a dreary level. The music is not really that good. It's supposed to be kind of like a windy maze, but you can see where your destination is. It does not have the bad filler problem of some other areas, but it's still just a pretty bleak level with nothing really to it. There's some unique monsters here and there, but a lot of dead ends and just not a fun level to go through. Next up is Prison Island, going to go up the top at C tier. It's more of an upper C, lower B tier, I would say, also with Ignithra. It's a location that is pretty cool. I mean, the music is really cool. It has a lot of cool areas to it, but it does not have any landmarks whatsoever. That's just kind of one big fault about the area, is that you do a lot of walking with it, especially during the entry hall, because it's just one straight shot to the back. It's quite a lot of walking there, and plus the landmarks in this area don't exist. Like, you have to go through roughly 60% of the dungeon before you get your first landmark, which is honestly kind of stupid because it could have used one in the banquet hall because there's a lot of back and forth there, but oh well. Now we're getting to the final location of the Xenoblade 1 and Future Connected, and that being the Bina Shoulder. I really like the Bina Shoulder. I mean, the music is alright, but I think it's a really cool level. There are a few, it is a pretty open map, but it does fill it up with a lot of things. There's some giant treasures strewn about. There's a lot of unique monsters that kind of help fill up the void also. There's collectibles with Poro's favorites. There's a lot of side quests that let you go take you pretty much anywhere. And plus, once you first enter Alkamoth and do that things, most of the map is open at that point. There's quite a lot to it. I mean, Grand Dela is a pretty lackluster location, but I think it's a really cool map. There's a lot of kind of area design tropes that I do like, such as winding paths, like going through a mountain and then going over it. I think it's really cool. It has a lot of intricacies to it. There's a lot of biodiversity within it too, such as the cerulean plains, the mountains, the gigantic lake. There's a lot to this area that really adds to it and makes exploring it really cool. And if this is kind of like the direction they kind of want to go, along with some of the things with Xenoblade 2, I'm definitely down for it. And with that all done, now we're going on to Xenoblade Chronicles X. It's kind of hard to rank Xenoblade Chronicles X areas compared to others because a lot of focus on Xenoblade Chronicles X is open world exploration. It's a very exploration based game, so it's kind of hard to compare these to the others. I'll kind of do my best. I'll kind of rank them basically how it compares to the other locations for Xenoblade X, since some of these areas are going to be highly favorites and some of these not really so much, but generally all these areas are pretty much B tier and up. So they're all so well done. The first up will be NLA. NLA, the thing that I really don't like about NLA is the music. I don't like the daytime music, and it's the central hub thing. I don't really like it all that much, but it has a lot of cool things to it. Just the four districts to it. They all have their own areas. I mean, I really like the commercial and the residential districts. I really like how it's kind of done, just kind of that modern tone to it. And then there's also the sci-fi tone with the administrative district. I really like how the area is laid out and all that stuff. And I do like navigating it. I mean, yeah, the bloody lobsters are terrible, but as a central hub, it's actually really good. I just wish the music was better. Next up is Primordia. Primordia is also a really cool area. I'm going to put this at the top of A. I don't think it's quite as good as Noctilum good, but it's still a really cool area, just having the beachfront that you can navigate around, the various mountainous paths. There's two big lakes. Territorial Rothbart, I guess, so hayridden the Territorial, trying to pound you in the early parts of the game. There's a lot of cool intricacies to it. I do like exploring the upper region, so trying to get up there can be a little bit hazardous because of the higher level enemies that are up there. But it's still a really cool area, especially with the upper peaks you can go to, like Talon Rock Peak, I think. I don't know, it's been a few years since I last played the game, but it is still a really cool area. The music, I think, is alright. It's serviceable. Nothing grandiose, but it's just kind of there. And now for probably my favorite area in the series, Noctilum. Noctilum, I really like. It has a lot of cool areas to it. The first area is generally alright when you're just going through the first area in Chapter 4, I think. Just heading on into the first Gormat fight. I think it's a pretty alright area just navigating the swamp, but once you cross that bridge, it becomes beautiful. The music is fantastic. The Noctilum theme is probably my favorite in the entire series also. And plus, there's a lot of cool things. So you have this gigantic tree that you can climb up and go onto the Nopon bridges. There's numerous caves that are strewn about here. You have this gigantic, beautiful waterfall in the waterfronts that you can go up and along. I think it's a really cool level. It has a lot of layers to this area that kind of stack up on itself. And then you have the Divine Roots, which is a really cool area. I mean, yeah, it does have Telepathy the Endbringer, which will pound your butt in, but otherwise, it's a really cool area with a lot of cool caves to it, and I really like. Next up is Oblivia. Oblivia is an area that is generally alright. I mean, it's a desert location, which I'll be honest, I don't really like deserts all that much, but I think it's a really interesting area with how it's designed. The central area is There's a lot of outposts for the Ganglion also there, which does serve as pretty cool for fighting the Ganglion, but otherwise I think it's a kind of a bland level. The design of it is pretty interesting because you have the northern beach where in Chapter 12, Gradius the Headless Emperor likes to hang out. And the Oasis is probably my favorite area of the region, but otherwise I think it's kind of bland, especially with the desert atmosphere, but it's still pretty cool. Next up is Silvalum. Silvalum is a really cool area that I do like exploring a bit. The music is fantastic, though navigating it is a little It's kind of like more of a desert area, desert snow area. There's the central region, which really doesn't have too much to it. It just, all the fun stuff is kind of on the sides, and the central part is just kind of there. It doesn't have the cool intricacies that is kind of Primordia or of Inoculum. but I think it's still a pretty alright area. I mean, I do like the Sulian mountains. I do kind of like exploring there, and also I guess the beachfronts are kind of alright, but the music is fantastic. Actually, I'm going to put this down to upper A. The main carry about silvalum is the music, and plus I do kind of like the spore atmosphere of it too. Just, it could use a little bit more in the middle. And lastly, cauldros. Cauldros is probably going to be at the bottom of B tier. Move NLA up a little bit. Cauldros is a volcanic level. There's some cool aspects to it too. I do like the Galahad Fortress that's navigating around it. The lava pits though is just kind of bland and just there. Nothing I particularly like all that much. I mean, it's still a pretty cool area. I do like exploring the Anthropolis and the kind of the central hub of the Galahad forces, but otherwise the base level is just kind of there. All the fun stuff requires skills. And with that, we are now on to the final areas of the game. Well, I guess final areas of the video, and that would be Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Xenoblade Chronicles 2 doesn't have as many areas as Xenoblade 1, but it does expand them on a bit, and generally I do like some of these areas, some of these levels I really don't like. But yeah, so first up we're going to get Argentum up to upper C. I think it's an interesting area. It's a central commerce more or less. I mean, it does not really have too much to it. It's just kind of a town area, and that's really all there is to it. It's actually a pretty small map, all things considered. Once you navigate up and down a lot, there's nothing really too much there. I mean, it is supposed to be a really small ship, all things considered, and a good intro area, but otherwise, I think it's just kind of there. Gormat goes into upper A. I like Gormat more than I like Bionis Leg, because it does not have the problem that Xenoblade 1 does, is that it actually fills up a lot of the areas with a lot of biodiversity to it, and regions to explore, because you have collection points, you have treasure chests, you have unique monsters that are kind of a little bit better placed, treasure chests, and a lot of side quests take you to a lot of locations you need to go to, and hearts to hearts also, which kind of helps fill up the map a lot more organically compared to one which is just kind of just make large maps for the sake of being large. And I think Gormat is a really well done location. I don't know, just something missing about Gormat. Actually, Torghast exists. Okay, Torghast bumps it up to S tier. I really like Torghast. I think it's probably one of my favorite towns in the entire series. I really like exploring Torghast. The music is fantastic. On a technical front, it is kind of a laggy location because it's a large area, but it's still a really cool area to explore. There's a lot of intricacies to it too. That makes it pretty fun to explore. You have Cooley Lake, you have the Central Plains, you have the lower areas, and you also have the back part, which really doesn't have too much to it, but I think it's still a pretty cool location to explore. Kingdom of Viraya. If only the intro part wasn't so bland, it would be up in S tier. I don't like the intro location, the intro part of the area, primarily before you get to the main area. You have to go through half of Chapter 3, well, I guess half of Viraya in the Great Mall Rapids, and that general ascent to the Sauerkraut Summit. I think it's a kind of an location, all things considered, but once you get to the main part, it becomes beautiful. I love the atmosphere of the area. I just wish there was a little bit more on the base level. It kind of has the air-sea problem where a lot of the good stuff is up top, but the base level is just kind of bland. I mean, it's a really cool area. It does have a couple skips in the speedrun, primarily Tardigate skip, and I guess also the first zombie hover. I think it has a lot of cool things to it. It could use a little bit more on the base level, but it's still a pretty nice location. Kingdom of Mordain. It's a C/B tier area. Again, I'm not really a big fan of desert levels, but I think it's still a pretty cool location, all things considered. Just organizing things a little bit on this tier. I think the Empire of Mordain is an alright desert location. It has a lot of problems to the, I guess, the general layout of the area. I mean, navigating the old city of Tetum is a little bit tedious. And then also there's the upper region, which is kind of bland. And then you have the old factory. Thank God old factory skip exists, because that area is actually really bad. And honestly, it might be an A tier location because I really like Alba Cavendish and how it's laid out. But the old factory is just not that great. Next up is the Therian Archipelago. Hello there, ROC. At least the music here is beautiful, and it kind of de-incentivizes you to go into the cloud scene, try and explore things the brute force way. Instead, the Therian Archipelago just Let's go on to the pathways. It's a very linear location. You only have 2 ways you can really go within the Titans themselves. You can either take the level 30 route or the level 40 route, depending on how strong you are or reckless you are. Otherwise, it's just The music is fantastic. I like font set. I don't think it's quite Torghast good, but the music here is really good. It's just a little too linear for me. Next up is Indol. Indol is a bled location. Yeah, move that down to there. It's a bled location. You don't really have too much purpose of going here. It's kind of the slowest part of the speedrun for Xenoblade 2. All of Chapter 5 is just walking simulator pretty much. There's nothing really too much here, and Indol kind of exemplifies that much because you have the gigantic plazas that once again don't really have too much in them. Just for the sake of being large, I mean, it kind of feels like they might have had some boss fights there, but nope. It's just gigantic walking, and then there's not really too much, there isn't hardly any side quests here, since the area does get locked off at some point. And it's just a location that exists that I really don't care for. And now for the D tier to become a little more active, we have Temporantia. The music gets kind of repetitive because it's a very grandiose thing. I mean, yeah, for the first visit, the music does make sense, but after that, it just gets very stale and repetitive. And then the Titan itself is bland as hell. You have the central plane, which is absolutely nothing. One landmark, no unique monsters along the central plane. All the fun stuff is pretty much on the perimeter. It's just, it's not a good location whatsoever. At least it does have a few fun skips to it, such as early Shining Star chips, if you want to do some zombie hover shenanigans, but other than that, it's just, Next up is the Kingdom of Tanto. Yeah, upper A. It does have a few issues with it, but it's still a really cool area. Actually, I think it might be lower S. Yeah, lower S. I think this Kingdom of Tanto is a pretty cool location, all things considered. Ice pun intended. It's a pretty fun area. It does incorporate probably one of the biggest skips and more well-known skips of the speedrun, that being a Tanto Descent skip, where you just fall down to the bottom via zombie hover, but it's a really cool location. I love the music of Tanto. Both daytime and nighttime are both really good. It's pretty fun to navigate the Pillar City, even though we kind of skipped that in the speedrun now. But it's still pretty cool navigating the Pillar City, and then the lower part, it does have a little bit of the Valak Mountain problem, just being a gigantic map, but it does kind of fill up on the sides a little bit with activities such as unique monsters kind of strewn about here and there. And then also side quests take you to some of the more remote locations, such as Driver and Ice taking you to the Garlus location. You have Turklandia, and all that fun stuff. And then also you have Cloud Seeking Ken in the middle in the post game, but the bottom part is just I mean, I do like snow levels, so I think it's considered, but it just has something missing to it that prevents it from being a higher S, but it's still a really cool location. Spirit Crucible Alpine. Not quite Central Pit bad, but I do not like this location. It generally locks off pretty much the main battle gimmicks of Xenoblade 2. You can't do blade combos, so you're relying on driver combos. The AI does not know that you can't do blade combos, so they'll be constantly stuck on trying to be on Dromark when you can't use level 2 specials on Dromark, and the AI does not recognize this. And then also while the music is really good, it's very monotone in its color. It's just all the grays, and I really don't like location. I think it doesn't look that good. And it's just a very tedious location to explore because it's also where you need to have a common blade or two for fire. And if you don't have those, congratulations, your speedrun is dead. Yeah, it's where speedruns die if you don't have your necessary blades. At least one of the first locations, and it's just not a good location. Next up is Cliffs of Mortha. It's an lower C, upper D tier location. Cliffs of Mortha has a lot of issues with it, and that's mostly the geometry being very jank. It's a very linear location, and just the first part is just trying to get onto Malus navigating the Eberno cave ruins. It's very jank, it's very easy for you to fall off and to your death. It's also one of the roadblocks of the speedrun, because if you don't have enough wind blades, congratulations, your speedrun is boned once again. And then it's also where the game really steps up its difficulty, because both Malus and the Jalos fights are really difficult. And it also has two of the game's stronger super bosses, Gladiator Orion, which you can actually run into. And then there's also Ophion in the post game. It is a pretty difficult location, but all around it's just kind of there. It's another one of the bleaker levels. I mean, it has more colors than Temporantia and Alpine, but generally Chapter 7 is not fun on the gameplay front. Next up is the Land of Mortha. The Land of Mortha, it has a lot of cool lore implications with it being the original base of Earth and such. But navigating it is also an area that I really don't like navigating. It has a lot of issues to it too. Just moving some things around. It has a lot of issues to it too. Mostly, it's where some strong monsters exist. You are just Shulk and Jin for most of the level. It's where the game also really steps up its HP barriers because Inferno Goldo is a pain in the ass. And then also the area is just kind of bleak. I don't like the music here. People say that it's really cool. I actually don't like the music here. And generally it's just kind of a bland level to explore. Not really one that I particularly like, but I do like the lore implications. World Tree! Hello there, S tier. I love the World Tree. It's probably one of my favorite areas in the game. The music is one major factor because the World Tree's theme, Yggdrasil, is probably one of my favorite themes in the entire franchise. I love how it's composed. It's a gigantic mechanical tower akin to Macon's Field, and there are a few skips there. I mean, one of them is very stupid, that being Door's skip in Chapter 9, but it's still a really cool location to explore and climb up. There's a lot of cool, unique monsters here. It definitely is a sharp contrast in tone for the rest of the game, and I do like some of the things they incorporate here, and some of the other lore implications. I mean, it could use a few more distractions here and there in the ascent, but it's still a really cool location. Next up is the first low orbit station. Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't like the flow cell too much. I'm going to move Prison Island up one tier. I don't like first low orbit station all too much. I think it's a pretty bleak location. There's nothing really too much here. In fact, I would say it's the most empty of locations here. Elysium has nothing really to it, just some collection points and a couple treasure chests, but all around it's just a level with nothing in it. There is no enemies here until you get to the Colossus Hangar, which is a gigantic room of nothing. You have the Colossi you fight, which are like 6 or so, and then the door, and then the final boss. I don't think it's a really well thought out location. The reason why it's not D tier and why it's up in the C tier is that if you know Zombie Hover, and a particular corner you can clip through, there's a lot you can explore here in the in Elysium, such as falling down into the room with a conduit, or you can fall down to the skate pod hangar, which is used in the ending. I think it's actually really cool how it's used there, just how glitchy it is, but otherwise it's a location. And lastly, we have the Kingdom of Torna. I'm going to put it there in A tier. The reason why I like the Kingdom of Torna in A tier is that, well, all the individual locations would be like C or D tier. I don't like the individual locations. I think they're a little too linear, too small, and too congested. I like how it all blends together into one Titan because you have different areas you can go to. You have the Aletta location, which is a little bit more of a, I guess, marshy-ish location. The Marsh Plains, you have the desert, you have the forest, and then you also have the capital Oresco, which is S tier by music alone, but just in the interior, which is But all things considered, all the areas kind of, individually they're bad, but they combine together with how you can go between the different areas into a really cool Titan. I think that that the Bionic Shoulder does it a little bit better, but Kingdom of Torna is also a really cool location. I'm going to put it towards the top of A tier. I think it's a really fun location. So, with that all done, this is my tier list of pretty much all the locations in the Xenoblade series. Had differing opinions? Feel free to leave them down before, and like what you see, feel free to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you all for the next one. I don't know how many more Xenoblade tier lists I can do, but I'll see you all when I can think of another one.